Previously, you have learned that one of the 7 characteristics of living organisms is that they can move, either moving as a whole to a different place or moving only parts of their body. If they are moving from one place to the other place, we call this as a locomotion. And for example, it's like when you want to go to the toilet, you're moving your whole body. And the other type of movement is when we only move parts of our body. And this is what we call as simply as a movement. And an example of this is when you're typing in your laptop, you're moving parts of your body, you only move your fingers. Now these 2 types of movements allows us to do different things to sustain our life. For example, we find food, find shelter, escape from predators, and many more. To perform either locomotion or movement, animals have to rely on the skeletal system. This system is one of many organ systems it has, and the function is for support and movement. The support function is provided by the skeleton, while the movement function is provided by the muscle in conjunction with the skeleton. Let's have a look at skeleton first. There are 3 types of skeleton in animals, and those are hydrostatic, exo, and endoskeleton. Hydrostatic skeleton consists of fluid held under the pressure in a closed body compartment, giving the body shape and providing support for muscle actions. It also protects the other body parts by cushioning them against the shocks. And this kind of skeleton, however, cannot support or accommodate for terrestrial locomotion, such as holding animal's body off the ground. And in general, the hydrostatic skeletons can only be found in aquatic animals and also terrestrial animals that crawls or burrow by means of peristalsis movement. They also tend to have soft, squishy, and flexible body. An example of animals that have this hydrostatic skeleton is earthworms. It has a fluid-filled internal body cavity that is divided into separate compartments, and in this case, the fluid acts as a hydrostatic skeleton. Well, another example is a hydra, which body cavity is filled with water that acts as a hydrostatic skeleton. It has a contractile cells on its body wall, enabling it to alter its body shape by exerting pressure to the hydrostatic skeleton. And by contracting or relaxing, it can adjust its body shape, either elongate or shortening its body. Exoskeleton can also be referred to as an external skeleton. Variety of aquatic and terrestrial animals have rigid external skeletons, especially arthropods, groups that includes insects, spider, and crustaceans. The exoskeleton composed of layers of proteins and chitin, a type of polysaccharides. And in this case, the muscles are attached to the inner surface of the exoskeleton. To allow for movement, exoskeleton's position on its joint somehow thin and flexible. Since this exoskeleton is composed of non-living materials, aka not cells, it doesn't grow within the animals. It has to be molded and replaced with a larger exoskeleton, and this has to be done at a certain intervals to allow for animal growth. Arthropods may mold several times, and for a brief period after molting, the exoskeleton is pretty much soft and elastic. At this point, they are not fully mobile because the soft exoskeleton cannot support for full muscle actions and is susceptible to predation. Another category of animals that have an exoskeleton is mollusks, such as clams and snails. And unlike arthropods, mollusks do not mold. Rather, it enlarges the diameter of its edge by adding the outer edge. The exoskeleton is formed by a mineral called sodium carbonate. Endoskeleton can be referred to as an internal skeleton. It consists of hard and leathery supporting structure among animal tissues. Vertebrate endoskeletons consist of cartilage and a combination of cartilage and bone. Well, the vertebrate skeletal system provides a structural support and a means of locomotion. Subsequent evolution of tetrapods or four-limbed animal constituting superclass tetrapod produces diverse groups of animals, such as amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. Each of these groups has diverse body form whose skeleton are constructed from modified versions of the same parts. Let's take mammals for example. Aquatic mammals like dolphin and terrestrial mammals like boar, they have different shape. However, they are just variation of the same theme. All vertebrates have an axial skeleton, which is reddish and orange in this picture. And this is used to support the axis of the body. The axis of the body consists of the skull, the vertebrate column, or you could say a backbone, and the thoracic cage or the rib cage for most vertebrates. The skull and the vertebrate columns protect the central nervous system components, which is the brain and spinal cord respectively, while the rib cage protects the lungs and the heart. The vertebral column is a definitive characteristic of vertebrates, and it consists of a series of individual bones we call vertebrae, which is joined by pads through the cartilage called disc. The number of vertebrae varies among species. Let's say adult human has 33, while snakes like python, well, they can have up to 600 at most. All vertebrae have the same basic structure, only with a slight variations that reflects the position of each vertebrae in the backbone. Now let's talk about human. Vertebral column can be divided into several regions, just like shown in this picture. You have 7 cervical vertebrae, which makes up your neck, 12 thoracic vertebrae, which support your chest, 5 lumbar vertebrae, which is on your lower back, and 5 sacral vertebrae located between hips, 4 coccygeal vertebrae, which is partially fused into a tailbone. Another part of the axial skeleton is the skull, and human skulls is made of 8 cranial bones and 14 facial bones. The cranial bones enclose and protects our brain, while the facial bones contain sockets for our eyes, nose, ears, and also providing opening which is connected to our digestive system and our respiratory system. The 8 cranial bones consist of a pair of parietal bones, a pair of temporal bones, frontal bone, occipital bone, sphenoid bone, and ethmoid bone, while the 14 facial bones consist of mandible, femur, a pair of maxillary bones, a pair of zygomatic bones, a pair of nasal bones, a pair of lacrimal bones, and a pair of palatine bones, also to inferior nasal conchae. They are connected with immovable joints, we call them as sutures, and their position is as shown by this picture over here. We will not, however, going to dig deeper than this. The last of the axial skeleton is the thoracic cage, or we can call it as a rib cage if you want. And this part is formed by sternum and 12 pairs of ribs. Sternum is the sword-shaped bone in our chest, and it can be divided into 3 parts: manubrium, the body, and the xiphoid process. The 12 pair of the ribs are posteriorly anchored to the 12 thoracic vertebrae. That means it's anchored to the 12 thoracic vertebrae located on the back. These 12 pairs can be further divided into 7 pairs of true ribs and 5 pairs of false ribs. 2 pairs of the last false ribs are known as floating ribs because they're not connected to the sternum. Why is it called true and false ribs? True ribs are ribs that are directly connected to the sternum through the causal cartilage, while the false rib can be either indirectly connected, which is the first 3 of false ribs, or not connected at all, and that is the last 2 ribs, pair number 11 and number 12. Most vertebrates also have appendicular skeletons, which is made of appendage bone and the bones that anchor such appendage to the axial skeleton. For land vertebrates, both pectoral and pelvic girdle provides a base support for the bones on forelimbs or upper limbs and the hind limbs or the lower limbs. Modified version of the same bones can be found in all vertebrate limbs, whether they are arms, legs, fins, wings, and etc. This variety of limbs provide vertebrates for different type of locomotion. Fun fact is, snake is also a vertebrate, but the thing is, they lost their limb during the evolution, and a hypothesis stated that it resulted from changes to the vertebrate column. Let's have a look at the 4 limbs and its support base, which is the pectoral girdle. The pectoral girdle links the 4 limbs to the axial skeleton, and it consists of clavicle or collarbone, which connects the scapula or shoulder blade to the sternum. The forelimbs consist of humerus, and it connects between scapula in your shoulder to the both ulna and radius at the elbow over here. And the end of the ulna, the other end of ulna and radius is connected to 8 carpals, which makes up your wrist. And the carpals are connected to 5 metacarpals that makes up your palms. Connected to these 5 metacarpals are 14 phalanges, or the bone of fingers. The hind limbs have pelvic girdle as a support base. And the pelvic girdle consists of 2 hip bones, which contains ilium, pubis, and also ischium. And this provides a stable support for the vertebral column. And well, these 2 hip bones are connected through the pubic symphysis. For the hind limb itself, it consists of femur, which connects between the pelvic girdle to the tibia and fibula. Between the femur and these 2 bones, between femur and the tibia fibula, there is a small bone that protects the knee joint. We call it patella. And the other end of tibia and fibula is connected to 7 tarsals, which makes up the ankle. These tarsals are connected to 5 metatarsals that makes up the base of our foot. And lastly, the toe in our foot is made of phalanges, the same as fingers in our hand. Well, all these bones I've just mentioned can be classified into 5 types: long bones, short bones, flat bones, irregular bones, and sesamoid bones. Long bones include some of the longest bone like femur, humerus, and tibia. But well, some of the smallest like metacarpals, metatarsals, and phalanges. It is called long because it has a body that is longer than its width. And well, it also has a hard outer surface of a compact bones and a spongy inner bone. Both ends are covered in hyaline cartilage to help protect the bone and aid in absorption of shock. Short bones also includes carpals and tarsals. It is called short, well, because their length is about the same as their width, and their function is basically providing support and stability with a little movement. This type of bone consists of thin layer of compact and hard bone with a spongy bone inside. There is a relatively large amount of bone marrow in this type of bone. Flat bone is a strong and flat, protecting the body vital organs and also acting as a base for muscular attachment. Some examples are scapula, sternum, and cranium, ilium of the hip bone, and also ribs. The anterior and posterior surface are made of compact bone to provide for strength and protection, while the center consists of a spongy bone and with varying amount of bone marrow. Irregular bones. These are bones that have irregular shape, hence they do not fall into any other bone type. For example, we have a mandible or lower jaw bone. They primarily consist of spongy bone with a thin layer of compact bone. One type of bone that is not mentioned in your book is called sesamoid bone. And the sesamoid bones are usually short or irregular, but is embedded in a tendon. An example is patella, which sits within the tendons called quadriceps. Sesamoid bones are usually present in tendons where it passes over a joint to protect the tendon. Well, speaking about bones, bones are not as simple as it looks. Actually, it is a complex living organ. And over here, I have a picture of humerus, the 4 limbs upper bone. Well, a sheet of fibrous connective tissue, which is colored in pink, covers most of the outside surface of the bone. This tissue is responsible to help form the new bones in the event of fracture. The cartilage, colored in blue, acts as a cushion for movable joints, protecting the end of the bones as they glide against each other. The 2 ends of the bone covered with cartilage is what we call as epiphysis. The bone itself contains living cells we call osteoblasts, and these cells secrete material called matrix. The bone matrix consists of flexible fibers of proteins we call collagen and embedded in the hard mineral substance made of calcium, phosphate, and magnesium. The collagen keeps the bone flexible and non-brittle, while the hard mineral resists the compression. The matrix hardens and traps the osteoblast inside, to the point that it changes structure and develops itself to become an osteocyte. Each of the osteocytes can be found in a small liquid-filled space we call a lecne, and this is located in the bone matrix. The osteocytes have a long branching channel, we call them as a canaliculi, and this allows the cells to coordinate with other cells. Depending on the construction of the matrix, bone can be either compact or spongy. The compact bone is heavy and strong, and also dense, while the spongy bones are lighter, porous, and less dense. The basic unit of compact bone is what we call osteon, or we also call them as a Haversian system. Each osteon consists of concentric rings of bone we call lamellae. The osteocytes, once again, is located in a liquid-filled space called lecne, located between lamellae. And the canaliculi radiates from the lecne to the central canal known as Haversian canal. The canal contains the blood and also the nervous system. Now let's go back to the first picture. And the shaft of the long bone in this picture is made of compact bones. The compact bone surrounds the central cavity, which contains the yellow bone marrow, which is mostly fats brought by the blood. And the ends of the bone have an outer layer of compact bone and an inner layer of the spongy bone. The spongy bone contains a red bone marrow which specializes in the erythrocyte formation. Just like any other living cells, bone cells can perform metabolic actions. Blood vessels extending through the channels in the bone transport the nutrients and hormones to its cells and also helps to remove the waste products. And also, positioned in parallel to the blood vessels is nerve fibers, which helps to regulate the traffic of materials between bone and the blood. Well, bones are rigid and they cannot move by their own. Therefore, muscles must be attached to it. Bone is connected to muscles through tendons. However, bones must also be connected to other bones as well, otherwise the structure will probably fall apart. And this connection between bone to bone is facilitated by ligaments. The connection between two bones is what we call joints. These two connective tissues altogether are responsible for moving the bone. However, here's the thing. When the joint is moved because you want to do something, there will be frictions. And these frictions may damage both ends of the bone. The higher the intensity of the movement, the higher the damage that will be done to the bone. This can be overcome by filling the cavity of the joints with a liquid we call as a synovial liquid. And this liquid is secreted in the synovial cavity and is acting as a lubricant that reduces frictions between two bones in the joints. And there are several joints, such as pivot joints that allows for limited rotating movement like the one in our neck, ball and socket joints that allows the rotational movement in all directions like in our shoulder and hips, the saddle joints that allows the movement of two planes either back and forth, up and down like the one in our thumb, ellipsoid joint that allows a limited rotational movement like the knuckle joint, the hinge joint that allows the movement in one plane like an elbow or your knee, and finally the gliding joint that allows a gliding movement like one in your ankle. And that is all for this video. I hope you enjoy the video. And well, I suggest that you take notes because there are a lot of new scientific terms over here. I also suggest that you watch it repeatedly in order to get what I was trying to say. Well then, good luck with your study and I will see you again in the next video. Bye bye.